Bruchim Habayim. Welcome everyone. We're continuing with our discussion, our learning of the Gemara Bava Batra. We are on Daf Dalet Amud Beis, that's 4b. And to our audience here, live audience, we have handouts with the text. And to our growing online audience, if you need a copy of it, just contact me through the app. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, contact me, and I'll be glad to email you copies of the text as well, so you can follow right along if you don't have it. So before I start, on Friday night, last Friday night, one of the members of this class, David Farber, and I were guests at the same home for a Friday night dinner, and David raised the question. And I love that because it shows that people are engaged in what we're doing and thinking about it a little bit. So what we're discussing, and we're going to get to our friends, the three farmers, in a little bit. Plus, we're going to introduce some new characters tonight too. But we were talking about a wall separating the properties of farmers, and what was the effect of that, and who had to pay for it, and so on. And so we said that if the wall were made out of whatever material it was, whether the farmer who was not necessarily eager to have the wall, or didn't express a desire to have the wall, whether he was required to pay the full value of what was done, or maybe some lesser amount. And so the most expensive type of wall that was discussed was a stone wall. So David pointed out to me that in New England, stone walls were basically property markers, right? It wasn't necessarily, or they were doing to clear the fields, right? You said that there was a way to remove the rocks from the field.
It was clearing the fields as opposed to creating a boundary.
Exactly. So what do you all think about that? In other words, what we said, and the premise that we did last week, and we're going to continue with it, is that if you just follow me here, if we have a situation where we have, this case we're showing three farmers, it could be two farmers, where one farmer has his property internal to the property of other farmers, right? And so if Eitan built a fence on three sides of Abraham on the inside, and then Eitan went to Abraham and he said to him, well, I built this fence, I paid for it, you need to pay me half, right? You have to reimburse me for my expense. And then Abraham said to Eitan, what good does it do me, a fence on three sides? I don't need it, and I'm not going to pay you. And then the case came up, well, suppose the fourth wall wasn't closed, what happens then? But so what David said to me was that a stone wall wasn't necessarily a boundary, it was basically a way to clear the field. So I thought about that a little bit, and there are some rocky fields in Israel too. It's not just this. There are some rocky fields, but I don't know. What do you think about what David had to say? Does what he said, does that have any validity? Yes,
I would question it only in terms of the fact that I believe we may have an example in the Torah where individuals from two locations set up a pile of stones and use that pile of stones as a boundary marker.
Okay, so there you are. So now the Torah tells us that the stones were used as a boundary, not necessarily as a way to clear the field. Okay?
Stones is a marker is in one place.
Right.
It marks the corner of something, or a point at which you draw a line from one to the other. It is not the same thing as a fence or a wall.
Okay.
Which building it as stones as a purpose would be the most expensive and the hardest way of building it.
Okay.
The only logical reason is to clear the field, or the only other purpose it's ever used is for doing terracing to make arable land.
Okay, what do you think, Moshe?
Clearing a field, it depends what they use the stones and how they did it. If they did it in a certain pile in an erection as a fence, in other words, not haphazardly put down.
Right.
As sometimes the Gemara discusses about money, if it's strewed all over the place, or is it piled in a certain area. Same with stones. If it's made along a certain section, so it's obviously there to separate one side from another, therefore it becomes a...
That's not why it was made.
Yeah.
So in our case, the farmer who built the wall is saying just that. He's saying, I did this for your benefit as well as mine, and I did happen to use the most expensive type of material, maybe because I wanted to be more durable, because a stone wall is probably going to last longer than a fence made out of sticks or something like that. So there is, I guess, the element of clearing the land. Maybe that was a benefit to both, and because otherwise, where would he get the stones, right? You have to bring them in from some distance. But anyway, it's kind of an interesting way of looking at the same situation. So if we go back to the text, if you have the text in front of you, and I put a couple of flags, the pink one on the Hebrew side and the colored one. Yes,
Sorry,
Karen?
I'm a little confused.
Only a little.
Abraham's farm
Right.
has 2 parallel solid lines and 2 parallel dotted lines. Which, is his land enclosed on 2 sides or 3 sides?
That's a good question. Actually, this should be a solid line.
Oh, okay.
This one should be a solid line, and the fourth one is the line, the one that's in question, right? That should have been a solid line.
David, I don't understand, why is he, maybe a stupid question, I don't know, but why is he building 3 walls around someone else's property? Is his farm circling around his?
Yeah. So what's happening here is you have these 2 farmers. If you have Eitan. Eitan encloses Avram on 3 sides, and he builds a wall on all 3 sides. And now he says to Abraham, you should share in the cost of that wall. I built it, it benefits both of us, you should pay half. So then the next case is, there's a 3rd farmer, or it could be Eitan himself, on the 4th wall. And now what happens is that, in our case last week, Abraham went ahead and built this 4th wall. So when he built that 4th wall, what did he demonstrate?
He showed that he's going to benefit from the fence, therefore Hitaka owes Eitan money.
Right, he wants the fence. Because if he didn't build that 4th wall, he could say, look, it doesn't matter to me. So by building that 4th wall, he's showing that the wall means something to him, because when his neighbor first came to him and said, hey, you need to pay me, he said, I don't need that. Why do I have to pay you? You wanted to build a fence, you wanted to clear your land and get the rocks out of it, whatever you want to do with it, it's good for you. I didn't need it. So here, by building the 4th wall, he's showing that he did one, okay? So we're gonna, yes, Bob?
My question is, Eitan, did he ever go to Avram and say, I'm building the wall prior to his building the wall?
Well, that's what one of the ladies brought up last week, and we sort of decided that if this were 2 women involved, they would have discussed it beforehand, and they wouldn't have had this problem.
No, but because based on that, if Eitan put up the most expensive one,
Right.
Avram says, I want nothing of it. I could have put up rocks from the field to clear the field.
Or some kind of a cheaper material, right? So that's all true, and so that brings us to the whole discussion of why did he go ahead and do it? And there is a concept in American law that if I do something that benefits my neighbor, even though he didn't want me to do it, or he didn't ask me to do it, and he benefits, then I sort of have a case to maybe collect something from him. So that is an idea, and it's not a new idea. It's been around a long time.
Is building a 4th wall preventing the farmer from ever getting out of if he wants to leave, how is he gonna leave?
Okay, so the property is surrounded by others, and the assumption is that he's got an easement. There is a path that he can get out, that he's not totally locked in by his neighbors. He has a path that he can get out, and that's another topic, by the way. When you sell a property that's landlocked, are you selling the easement, or does he have to pay you additional for the easement? But everybody agrees there has to be an easement. There has to be some way for him to get out of there. But the issue is, again, is he benefiting? And if he indicates that he wants that, then maybe he needs to participate. So, continuing today at the point where we're starting. So, we started with a Mishnah, and the Mishnah has two authors. The first one of them is what we call the Tana Kama, the first Tana, and then Rabbi Yossi comments as well. And when there is an anonymous Mishnah and someone else comes in and makes a comment, it means he's adding something. He's maybe disagreeing with what the original statement is. And we're going to get into what is that disagreement, what is that, what don't they agree on, and why did Rabbi Yossi feel the need to come along and add to what the Tana Kama said? Because the Tana Kama basically said that if somebody built a wall on three sides and the other person, the enclosed one, doesn't want it, you can't force him to pay. And then Rabbi Yossi came along and said that if he builds if that individual builds that fourth wall, now you can require him to pay for the whole thing, for his half of all four walls. So the Gemara says, Bishlam al Rav Huna. So that's okay according to Rav Huna, the Amar, who said, Hakol lefi ma shegadarba. So getting to the cost of the material, because some materials we know are more expensive than others, and Rav Huna said that what this Eitan can require Avram to pay depends upon the value of what he did. In other words, it's not necessarily the least expensive, but it has to relate to what he spent to build this fence. So the Gemara continues. It says, "Hainu deika bein Tana Kama v'Rabbi Yossi." So here is the difference. Here's why Rabbi Yossi felt compelled to offer an opinion, because he says Tana Kama Savar. So the first Tana, who most likely is Rabbi Meir, because most anonymous Mishnayos are Rabbi Meir, but we don't really know because it's still not. There's no attribution there. But let's say it's Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir doesn't really matter. He says Hakol lefi demei kanim bezol. He says all you can require him to pay is the value of the cheapest fence. He's saying a fence that's made out of wooden reeds, basically, pretty much a temporary structure, like a snow fence or something like that. He says, Masha Gadar, lo, but you can't require that internal one, that Abraham, to reimburse Eitan for his outlay. Eitan decided to make a more extravagant construction. That's not Abraham's problem. Okay, so all you can require him to do is to pay the cost of a less expensive one. Rabbi Yossi Savar, and Rabbi Yossi, who added the comment at the end, he says Hakol lefi ma shegadar. So when he interjects and he adds this statement that we are megalgaling, where we roll it onto him, that everything is he has to pay for all of it, that relates to what he actually spent. So if he went ahead and he built a wall out of bricks or stones or something like that, and it cost a lot more money than building a temporary fence, and now the fourth wall is built by this internal farmer, Avram, well, then according to Rabbi Yossi, you can require him to pay the total value. So the Gemara continues, it's Ela lechia bar Rav Amar, but Chia bar Rav, Chia the son of Rav, said, Hakol lefi demei kanim bezol. So he agrees with Rabbi Yossi in the sense that you can require the internal farmer to pay for all four walls, but only the value of the least expensive fence. Okay, so you've got a difference of opinion here. So Ma'ika bein Tana Kama la Rabbi Yossi. So if that's the case, what's the difference between according to him now? He's saying that all you can require him to pay for is the least expensive one. So how is Rabbi Yossi and the Tana Kama any different from each other? Because they're both now saying the same thing according to Chia bar Rava. So idamei kanim bezol lo koyoivle, my koyoivle. So if you can't give him, if you don't require him to pay the value of the less expensive fence, so what can you ask him to pay? If you're going to say he's got to pay something, what is it that he has to pay? So iboy yisema, maybe you could say agar natira ikabenai. So maybe you could say that yes, you can't require him to pay the value of the material, but there's another way that the problem can be solved. Because what's the problem? What is the problem? The wheat is ready to be harvested, and the owner of the farm, or the farmers, are concerned that somebody's going to show up now on their farm, right? And right? So this goat might show up on the farm. And what's the goat gonna do to the farm? That goat is gonna eat the
Profits.
produce, right? So how can he solve the problem? So he can solve it with a fence, which is what we're originally talking about. But now we're saying that we can't necessarily require him to pay for a fence, even the cheapest one. So what can we ask him to pay? After all, it's just a temporary period of time. We can ask him to pay for a watchman. Somebody to come along and keep watch, right? Rachel? No?
Yes, yes,
You
yes.
want to get rid of this guy,
Yes, yes.
you bring along this guy, right?
Okay.
So there you go. So you can say to him, what should he give him? Aganatiri. You can at least ask him to pay the cost of that security guard, right, to watch. It says Tanakama Savar. So the first Tana of our Mishnah says, Aganatiri, and he says, yes, I'll agree with you that he should pay for our friend over here, but to make Hanan Bezolo, but I won't require him to pay for the fence, because basically it's only a few days that the fence needs to be watched, because the rest of the time they're not concerned. He's only concerned the crop is ready to be harvested, and he doesn't want, he doesn't want the goats or other animals to come, and it's not only goats, by the way. It could also be rabbits, right? Rabbits also are going to come and make a mess of the property. So he says that, okay, I'll go along with that. So Rabbi Yossi Savar. Now Rabbi Yossi, remember, is stricter, right? Rabbi Yossi says that he can be required to pay for all 4 walls. He says, so according to Chiyuv Harav, so Rabbi Yossi would say Demei Kanim Bezol. So at least what you can require him to pay is the value of that less expensive fence. Okay. So Iba Yisema, or you could say there could be another way of looking at this. Rishona Shnio Shlishis Ikabinayu. The wall is number 1, number 2, and number 3, right? Because remember, he's surrounded on 3 sides. So Tanakama Savar. So the first Tana, first opinion in our mission says, Revius Hu Diyoivle. What he has to pay him for is only the 4th, right? Because what did he actually do? This internal. What did this Avraham? What did he actually do? What did he build here? This Avraham. He built only the 4th wall, right? So the 4th wall, or even if the neighbor built the 4th wall. So we're going to try to collect from this Avraham the value of the 4th wall. So that's the Tanakama opinion. Ava Rishona Shniyu Shlishis Lo Yodivli. But the first and the second and the third, he's not going to be required to pay. Rabbi Yossi Savar, and Rabbi Yossi, who made his second comment in the Mishnah, he says Rishona Shniyu Shlishis Nami Yoivli. So too must he pay for the first wall, the second wall, and the third wall, not just the 4th wall. Iboy Yisema, or you could say another way you could look at it. Makif Venikaf Yivkadnayu. The difference is the person who's building the wall. Is it the person who is surrounded, or the person who is doing the surrounding? In other words, is the external one building it, or the internal one actually building the wall? The Tanakama Savar, Taima de Aman Nikaf de Magagalin Love Esakol. The reason that we're asking Avraham, this internal one, to pay is because he got up and built the wall. In other words, if the 4th side was enclosed by someone else, whether it's
David Yitzchak, maybe.
whether it's David Yitzchak, which is my name, by the way. By the way, these names we didn't pull out of the air. Eitan is a grandson, Avram's a grandson, and David Yitzchak is me. So maybe next week we'll have some new names. But anyway, the point is that if the 4th wall, let's say Eitan surrounded Avram on 4 sides, and now he built the 4th wall. So then in that case, the reason that that Rabbi Yossi expects Avram to pay is because Avraham, the internal one, built the wall, right, Mike? Okay. I will Amad Makif, but if the one that built it was the external one, the one that's surrounding, Eno Nosin Lo Ela Demei Revius. All that you can require the Avraham on the inside to pay is for the value of the fourth wall. You got that, Yaakov? Makes sense to you? Okay. For Rabbi Yossi Savar, Rabbi Yossi says, Lo shna nikaf, lo shna makif. Rabbi Yossi sees no difference. It doesn't matter to him whether the person building the wall is the one on the inside or on the outside. If Mamad Vagodar, if somebody got up and built this wall, in that case, Megalgalin Lovis Hakol. You can require this internal one to pay for all of it. So Lishna Achrin, another way that you could read this is Makif and Nikaf Yikabenayu. There's a difference between whether the person who built the wall was the outside one or the inside one. So Tanakama Savar, Im Gadar Makif Esaravius, if the wall that was built by the outside one was the fourth one, Nami Yoivle, he also has to give him, he has to pay. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Im Amad Nikaf Gadar Esaravius, Hu Yoivle. So now he says that you could look at this a different way. Up until now, we've been saying that Rabbi Yossi is the stricter one, right? Now we're saying maybe not, maybe just the reverse. So in other words, if this outside one built that wall, right? So if it was either Eitan, if he's on the fourth side, or it's David Yitzchak, in that case, he's saying that you can't require him to pay, right? Only if he went ahead and he did it himself, can you require him to participate in the expense of the wall. The Gali Daite Nichole, because he revealed his intentions, right? By building that wall, by Abraham building that fourth wall, he indicated that the wall means something to him. Right? Jack? Okay. Because he's showing that he wants that wall. Otherwise, why would he go to the trouble and expense of building it unless it meant something, unless he wanted it? So in that case, Aval im Gadar Makif, but if the outside one built the wall, Lo Yoav Leimidu. So now, according to Rabbi Yossi, he wouldn't build anything. He wouldn't have to pay anything because his position remains consistent. When the first three walls were built, he said, I don't need them. And then when the fourth wall is built, again, he didn't build it. He said, you didn't build this, right? And so he doesn't want to participate. So now, if you turn to the next page, we're going to get a real live incident that actually took place. So now we're beginning on Pei Amud Aleph 5a. Okay, so now you have an incident. Runya, there's a certain person named Runya who was the neighbor of Ravina. So Ravina, we know, was one of the compilers, one of the editors of the Gemara. And so he was certainly a righteous person. And Runya was his neighbor. And so what happened there? Akfe Ravina me'arba ruchosa. So Ravina's field, so now instead of having the situation where it's Avram surrounded on three sides and then someone else on the fourth side, so here's Runya. Runya's on the inside now. And Ravina surrounds him on all four sides. Right? So obviously that Runya has a way to get out. He's not stuck in there. He has no helicopter as far as I know. So he has to have a way to get out. But that's not really our issue. Our issue is that Ravina, who is surrounding Runya on all four sides, right? So what did he do? So Ravina built a fence because he didn't want, he didn't want this one, and he didn't want this one, right, coming into his property from Runya's property and destroying his crops. So he built the fence. He built the fence all the way around. And then he went to his neighbor. So again, Ravina was a smart man, and he was a great rabbi, but he didn't do what ladies would have done, right? He didn't talk to his neighbor first. He didn't work it out first. But that's our case. He went ahead, he built the fence, and he said to Runya, he said, hey, I built this fence, it benefits both of us. Pay me at least half of what I laid out. It cost me to build this fence. So Lo Yoavle, Runya didn't want to give it to him. So now what? So he says, okay, Havli Lefi Kanim Bizol. So at least I built a wall, let's say he built it out of brick. right? I built this brick wall, and you don't want to pay me the value of a brick wall. At least pay me what it would cost to build this temporary, this snow fence type of operation, where like a reed type fence, just to protect our crops from our friends,
The rabbit and the goat.
the goat and the rabbit, right? So we want to protect our property from that. So you're going to benefit too, because you have the fence up. It's not going to, the property is not going to be invaded by these pests. So he said, at least pay me half of what it cost me to put up that, half of what it would have cost if we built this less expensive fence. So he says, lo yoivle. So Runya said, no, sorry, I'm not paying. You wanted a fence, you built a fence, it's your headache. So he said, all right, his havli agar natururso. So at least, come on, you know, there's gonna be some value to you of keeping these pests out, even just the cost of the watchman for the few days that we're gonna protect our crop before it's harvested. At least give me that, right? So what happened? Lo yoivle. He refused to pay. So what happened? Yom echad hava kagodar dikli. So at one point, Runya was harvesting his dates from his palm trees, and he made like a little fence around the palm trees. Amar leila arise. So Ravina said to his sharecropper, he says, Zil shkol minei kibura dahini. Go get a bunch of dates. Go take a bunch of dates from what our neighbor Runya is harvesting. So the sharecropper listened to Ravina. He went to take some. Rama Bekola. So Runya let out a geshrei, right? He said, hey, what's going on here? You can't just come and take it. So Amar Le, so Ravina now says to Runya, Golis daitach de menach nichola. You have just indicated by your behavior, you don't want people coming into your property and taking the crops that you worked hard to grow. So lo yehe ela izabama. So what did Runya answer him? He said, I'm not concerned about your sharecropper people. I'm only concerned about goats. I'm only concerned about goats. And so Ravina said to him, well, if you're concerned about a goat, Milo boil into Rusa, so wouldn't you need at least to have a watchman, a security guard to protect your field from the goats, right? Amarle, Izav Amalav Echlule Baya. So he said to him, a goat, basically, I can shout and chase away the goat. So I don't need anything that you're trying to make me pay for. Amarle, Ravina said to him, V'lo Gavra Boy Demichli, don't you need a person to shout and scare away the goat? In other words, he's saying to him, at least, come on, you have to be willing to give me something. So now Runya saw that Ravina wasn't just letting go of this whole thing. So he decided that before Ravina sues him, he's going to go to the head rabbi of the area, who was Rava, and he's going to plead his case. Runya, the one who's inside, he's going to go to the rabbi first, which by the way happened in our life when we were newly married and we lived in a two-family house, and the very nice lady who lived downstairs didn't fix the hot water, and we had little babies, had to bathe them, and we didn't have hot water, and we complained, and so her daughter said, I'm going to go to the rabbi and complain about you, that you're giving my mother such a hard time. So we went to the rabbi. So we went to the rabbi first, and we said, come on, the lady doesn't give us hot water, we're paying rent here. So anyway, that's another story. But so anyhow, so here you have it, that Runya goes to Rava, and he says, you know, my neighbor Ravina is being unreasonable. He's harassing me, basically. He keeps asking me to pay him. So Amarle, so Rava responded to Runya. He said, Zil paise b'madi pais. He said, pacify him with whatever he'll accept. In other words, if he's willing to take that small amount to cover the cost, I don't have to show you his picture again, of the guard, at least pay that. Because if not, he said, Elo, the anana loch dina Rav Huna alivud Rav Yossi. Or if you're not willing to do that, then I'm going to enforce the halacha, which is what Rav Huna said according to the opinion of Rav Yossi, which means you would have to pay half of all 4 walls, at least the lowest amount of the wall, like the reed fence. So Runya really realized at that point that he had to do something, so he went ahead and he paid Ravina the cost. But now these two are not finished with each other. So there is a concept that if Karen owns a field and Marilyn owns a field next door to Karen's field, and then Rachel decides she wants to buy that field. Well, let's see, who wants to buy Marilyn's field, right? So Karen has the right of first refusal, right? Because she's the neighbor, right? We have that same concept today, right? In business deal, where let's say you'll sign a lease to rent the property, and you'll try to put into the lease a right of first refusal. That if someone comes, if your landlord decides to sell the property, you've got the right to buy it first. So in halacha, Torah law, that's called bar mitzvah. That if your property borders on your neighbor, you got the right first to buy it. So you can't pay less. In other words, if Rachel was willing to pay Karen more, so Marilyn can't buy it for a lower price, but she's got the right to buy it first. So you had that situation that Runya and Ravina had a piece of property, and Runya Zavan Ara a mitzvah to Ravina. So he bought a property that was actually adjacent to Ravina's property. So Savar Ravina Lesaluke Mishum Dina Devar Mitzvah. So Ravina now wants to take Runya to court because his property was also adjacent to that piece of property. Amalei Rav Safra, Rav Yeva, Ravina. So Rav Safra, the son of Rav Yeva, said to Ravina, Amri Inchi, and this is a little bit enigmatic what his statement was. He says, Arba Latzala, Arba Latzlala. When you buy an expensive piece of leather and you're buying it for 4 zuz, which is a significant amount of money, 4 zuz goes to the tanner. In other words, it's not always, somebody once said to me, sometimes a dollar is a penny and a penny is a dollar. You can't always evaluate a deal, and just as just your property borders that next door property, so Runya's did too, and you really can't make a big fuss about it. So that ends the discussion of these two neighbors, and we'll go a little bit further into the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah says, Kosel Chatzer Shenafal. If you have a situation where you have 2 partners sharing a common courtyard, and they have a wall separating them. Okay, we're on Hey Amid Aleph 5a, like the middle of the page. Hey 5a, Hey Amid Aleph. I don't know the way I put those pages together.
Right here.
In the middle of the page is the Mishnah.
Which one is?
Everybody has it? It's a little tricky because we printed up both sides of the page to save the shul money. Maybe next time we'll print out one side. But okay, so the case is there's a Kosel Chatzer Shenafal. There are two people who have contiguous properties, right? And there's a wall separating these 2 properties. Okay, so it could be in our case, let's say Avram and David Yitzchak, right? And they have a wall separating the 2 properties, and now the wall fell down. That wall fell down. However it fell down, hurricane, earthquake, whatever. So now, what happens? You have classic case of who has to pay, right? So you have so Robert and Larry own properties next door to each other, and they have a wall separating them, right? Because they're good neighbors, and good fences make good neighbors. And the wall falls down. So Robert runs out right away and rebuilds that wall. Because Robert is the kind of person who's not gonna let things hang around. He rebuilds the wall right away. And then he goes to Larry and he says to Larry, I rebuilt the wall. You need to pay me for half of that wall. So the only trouble is that Robert, in his enthusiasm, built it 6 feet high or 8 feet high, right? And Larry says, "What? I'm willing to pay you, but only for a standard height wall, right?" So that means the standard height wall is 4 amos, about 6 feet. So Robert built it 8 feet high. Larry says 6 feet is standard, and that's what I'm going to give you. So and the Mishnah says, "Mechayvenoso levnoso ad arba amos." All we can require Larry to pay is the value of a 6 foot, a 4 amo or 6 foot wall. Jack, right? Okay. So
who determines what a standard size is?
So apparently their idea was standard size. So if you look, I mean, today, if you want to build a wall around your property, let's say you've got a swimming pool in your backyard, and you want to put up a fence, right? So there's a standard height above which you need to get a variance, right? In American law, right? Anybody ever put a fence around your property when you were in your own house, right?
You have conflicting laws. The fence around the edge of the property is subject to one law.
Right.
The fence around a pool is subject to the health department law as to how high that fence must be.
Okay, so let's say you don't have a pool. You don't have a pool, so let's not bring that complication in there. And you and your neighbor you've got a fence between your properties, right? And whoever paid for it, that's a long time in the past, and there is a fence. So there's a standard size though, right? Because beyond a certain height, I think it's 6 feet, if you build a fence higher, if you want to build a fence higher than 6 feet, you need to get a variance, right? Because most building codes or zoning codes allow fences up to 6 feet tall. So apparently the standard height in the time of the Gemara was 4 amos, which an amma is between 18 and 24 inches. Let's say it's 18 inches, so that would be 6 feet. That's standard. And so therefore, if the standard height wall is 6 feet, you can only require your neighbor to participate up to what is standard. You can't ask them to pay more than the normal size wall, right?
Even if the pre-existing wall was higher?
If the pre-existing wall was higher, we're going to get to that. But that's a very good question, Curtis. That if the existing wall is higher, so now, let's say the wall fell down, they rebuilt the wall, and now the Mishnah says becheskas shenasan ad shi'abiraya shelo nasan. So now, let's say 6 or 8 months later, you have Robert and Larry, and Robert rebuilt the wall, and 6 months later, Robert goes to court and says, "I want Larry to pay." Well, Larry says, "I paid. What do you think? I paid you 6 months ago when you built it." So the Mishnah says we can assume that's true, because that's the way that things work. And here he's waiting 6 months to complain. Most likely he forgot or whatever it is, and we can assume that Larry paid his share. Mi'arba amos l'malon ein mechayvenoso. But if it's beyond 4 amos in height, we cannot require Larry to pay. So Robert might like to have an 8-foot fence or a 10-foot fence or whatever he might like, but he can't require Larry. It's bothering you, Dave, I can see it. But no, okay. So he can't require Larry to pay the difference. So now, how about this? Samachlo kosel acher. So now suppose you have this wall and it's 8 feet high, and Larry builds another wall the same height, the same 8 feet high, alongside of the wall that Robert built. Let's say he goes in 6 or 8 feet from the property line, and he builds another wall parallel to that. So what does it look like he's going to do? It looks like he's going to take these 2 walls and put a roof over them and build himself a little structure there. So what happens? So samachlo kosel acher. So if Larry built another wall parallel to the wall that Robert built, even though he didn't yet put the roof on, right? We suspect that's what he's intending to do, but even though he didn't do it, didn't put the roof on it yet, Magog and Lovis are called. We can now roll it. We can require him to pay for the whole thing. Why?
He actually needs that height. He's gonna use it. It's a value to him.
Right? He's indicating that a standard size fence is okay, but he wants that higher fence. Because what he did shows that he's gonna make use of that, right? So just like our first case where the enclosed farmer, by building that fourth wall, indicates that he wants the fence, this case too. By him building the parallel wall, even though he didn't put a roof on it yet, but we're assuming that's what he's gonna wind up doing, and therefore we can require him to pay half of the entire, or half of the extra. There's beyond the 4 amos, whatever additional height, we can ask him to pay for that too. And it's bechezka shelo nasan. And now, if we have the same case, Robert built the wall 8 feet high, okay? And now, several months later, or whatever it is, Larry built a wall parallel to it, also 8 feet high. So now, do we assume that Larry paid the difference between the 6 foot and 8 foot fence? No, we do not, because he's not required to. But by his action, he indicates he wants it, and therefore, he is bechezka shelo nasan. We assume he didn't pay that extra amount, because he would not have been required to unless he did something. In that case, ad sheyavi raya shenasan, unless he can prove it. So if Larry can prove that he participated in the entire height of that fence, in that case, he's off the hook. But unless he can prove that he paid for the additional height, now we can ask him to reimburse Robert for the additional, because Larry has indicated by his actions that he wants that to happen, and therefore he's going to be required to pay. And we're going to explore in the Gemara next time how this all actually works.
Thank you.